There's instructors out there who say that you absolutely need to learn line of sight. And I think that is outdated. Well, the more people can make money at a hobby, sort of the more it can grow and sort of be legitimized. I'll say one piece of advice that I don't agree with is...
Honestly, I'd be amazed if somebody hasn't seen or even heard about you. But for those that haven't, who are you and what do you do?
I am Joshua Bardwell. I make YouTube videos about FPV. That's what I always tell people when they ask what I do for a living. And then they're like, you make YouTube videos for a living?
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. How long have you been making YouTube videos, like from complete start?
Yeah, so I went full-time, I think in 2018. January 2018 was when I went full-time. And but I've been making videos for a few years before then, just when I wasn't doing my day job.
Yeah.
So that gets further and further away. Like 5 years ago now.
Yeah, I know. But 5 years is a long time to be full-time on a platform. But why did you originally start making the videos, right? Like, what's your reasoning there?
Yeah, I started making the videos because I just wanted to learn about this stuff. And one of the ways that I learn about the stuff is to kind of try to figure it out and then sort of package it up and teach it to other people. And so I originally started making PowerPoint presentations because I was an instructor, and I was used to making class, slides basically. And I posted that on RC Group's forum, and no one looked at it. And so I thought, well, there's got to be a better way. And I started making videos and posting them to my YouTube channel, which and then posting the links on RC Groups.
Yeah.
But it sort of took on a life of its own.
If we go back to, I guess, the beginning side of things, when and why did you get into the FPV space?
I got into FPV. Actually, I started RC flight with a fixed wing, but I got tired of having to leave home and go down to the soccer field to fly the fixed wing, because I couldn't really fly a fixed wing around my house. It's too many trees and stuff. And so I saw FPV. I don't know if it was maybe it was probably on Flight Test, because that was the main YouTube channel I was watching. Maybe it was Rotor Riot. I'm not sure. But I saw FPV and I thought that looked pretty cool. And I knew that I could fly FPV around my house because you can fly a multi-rotor in a much tighter spot. And I thought, well, okay, let's give this a try. And then, of course, I was hooked. And I can't remember the last time I flew a fixed wing.
Really? So you completely just sort of like got out of the fixed wing side of things and it was straight into the FPV quads full time?
Pretty much. I had a fixed wing for a little while, but I really enjoy flying multi-rotors a lot more.
Why is that? Like, what draws you into multi-rotors more? Is it the space sort of side of things, or?
Yeah, I mean, I do like that you can fly them just about anywhere. I think that you have a lot more sort of control with how you're interacting with the environment, whereas with a plane, you always have to be moving forward. You can't slow down or stop or do any of that, go backwards or sideways. Whereas with a multi-rotor, you pretty much can do whatever you want it to do.
For sure.
And that's really fun.
Yeah, I'm still yet to fly a fixed wing. I've been told by many people it's definitely worth trying, but yeah, I've only been in the FPV space, like without the fixed wing side of things. But I don't know. I feel like I kind of got into it with cinematography in mind, and that was sort of my way. And I haven't personally seen any cinematography with fixed wings, but
no,
there could be a way. I'm not sure.
I mean, if you look at FPV footage from a fixed, there's people who's going to be annoyed at you at saying I fly FPV versus fixed wing, and they're going to be like, you can fly a fixed wing FPV, and they're right. You can put FPV camera on whatever you want, but if you look at the FPV footage or GoPro footage from a fixed wing, it's so like bouncy and all over the place because there's no like stabilization like there is inherent with a multi-rotor, at least on most planes.
Yeah.
And when planes do have some kind of stabilization, like the control surfaces can only work so fast, right?
For sure.
So the footage is just nowhere near as good. And for me, at least, the experience of flying it isn't as enjoyable. I mean, you could take a plane up and you could have an FPV camera in it and you could be sort of looking out at the clouds, and that's kind of cool. But I really like, getting down near the ground and doing proximity stuff a lot better. I don't think planes are very good at that.
Yeah, I can't imagine that the control on a plane is quite as much control as you would have with a multi-rotor. I mean, hey, I could be wrong. I'm not experienced in it, so I won't speak on fixed wings anymore. But
yeah, oh, I've seen people do proximity fixed wing, like down near the ground, flying through trees. Very skilled pilots. I think it's very, very difficult. But I think it's rare.
Well, I guess it's probably similar to things like what is it, 3D helicopters, right? Is that that's what it's called, the 3D helis or something like that?
Yeah.
Have you had any time with those at all?
None, no. In the simulator only, and it just wasn't very good. I don't really do well with line of sight. I mean, with airplanes and line of sight, I was okay. Well, back when I flew planes, I probably am way out of practice. Because at the end of the day, an airplane is always flying forward, right? So if you're not 100% sure about your orientation, you can kind of like tip the wing, and if it goes the same direction as you tipped it, then you know it's going away from you. And if it goes the opposite direction, then you know it's coming towards you.
Yeah.
And then you could kind of like sort of dial it in. So as long as you can kind of basically see where the airplane is in the sky and whether it's climbing or descending, you could kind of fly it and get it back to yourself. But with a multi-rotor, it could be facing any direction and flying any direction. And it's the same principles sort of apply, but it's way easier for it to get away from you because you can't assume that it's facing the direction it's moving. And I really have a lot of respect for people like Quad Mover comes to mind, who fly line of sight, multi-rotor, acro. I mean, like I can hover line of sight, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm 100% on the same page as you here. The second that you turn that drone around, I'm lost, man. Like I understand everything's inverted, but holy crap, no way can I figure out that left is right and right is left. It just screws with my mind.
I think you can't think about it that way because you have to be able to translate it, not just facing you and facing away, but you have to be able to translate it in any direction. So like, I think mentally you like almost imagine yourself in the aircraft and then you're just sort of flying it to make the changes to the way that it's facing to make it do what you need it to do. But that's way easier said than done.
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely easier said than done. Much more enjoyable for me to put myself into goggles and just go sporadic, go crazy, which I'm curious to know. What do you actually enjoy about, like, I kind of see there's niches within the FPV space. You know, you got the racing, the cinematic, freestyle, long range, like these sort of subcategories. What's sort of your favorite, what do you enjoy the most about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've done some racing. I enjoy racing when I do it, but it's not what I do most of the time. I like freestyle most of the time, just kind of trying to learn new tricks and just seeing people do amazing things with the quad and then trying to figure out if I can do them too.
For sure, give them a bit of a replicate and throw it around and abuse the quads a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the way. So I found out today that you've actually created a documentary called Flow State. And from my understanding, it's a feature-length FPV documentary. I'd love to hear a bit more about it, actually.
Yeah, so I had a dream years ago to make a feature-length film about FPV. And I met this guy, James Christensen is his name, at a party, at a race, actually. It was a whoop race, a party whoop race, same thing.
Yeah.
And he actually had filmed a documentary previously, and he got it on Netflix, and he was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So we partnered up, and he did all the legwork, all the creative work, all the editing. He shot all the interviews, and I put up the money. So I got an executive producer credit for that. But we made a feature-length documentary about FPV. It's really cool and exciting to see FPV footage like you expect to see on YouTube up on the big screen. And it tells a story. It was filmed in about 2020, mid-2020 to mid-2021, and talks about, just does a lot of interviews with FPV pilots, talks about different aspects of FPV culture, and it's just really excited to finally have it out. have it available for people to watch.
For sure. That's awesome, man. So like if somebody wants to go and watch it, where are they going for that?
Well, so we've got a website. It is flowstatedocumentary.com. And there you can find links to places you can watch it. It is currently on Amazon Prime Video is probably the one most people are going to have. We have a Vimeo site, and then there are options to watch it ad-supported, so you can rent it like on Amazon Prime. You can also watch it ad-supported if you don't want to put any cash up, on Plex, Tubi, and Hoopla. And if you're old-fashioned like that, you can even buy a Blu-ray. The Blu-ray when we finished the initial edit of this film, we originally thought we might get it onto Netflix, which it didn't work out that way, but that was kind of our dream. And James edited it as like 3 40-minute sort of mini documentaries. So the total length was like 3 hours. I think that does it. I'm not sure those numbers work, but
well, let's run with it.
It was like 3 hours. And then we cut it down to like an hour and a half documentary, but the Blu-ray actually has like literally all of the original footage if you just can't get enough.
Oh, okay. So the Blu-ray is kind of like the exclusive in a way. So realistically, going with Blu-ray gets it in your hand and it gets all of the content in your hand. I love that.
But you have to have a Blu-ray player. So,
That's true.
mean, James really he was like, we were having a lot of trouble with distribution. We hoped to get it picked up like by Netflix, which because my goal at least, was not just to make a film that the FPV community would love, although that obviously was a goal, but was to make a film that people outside the FPV community could stumble across and go, oh, what's this documentary, and watch it and learn about FPV. So the hope was always to get it onto a platform like Amazon Prime was our sort of, that's probably the one that most closely fits that bill right now. And we had a lot of trouble getting it distributed. So while we were trying to get it onto all these platforms, James was like, why don't we just burn some DVDs? We'll just sell, Blu-rays.
Yeah.
We'll just sell discs and anybody who wants it can finally see it. So I still have several boxes of discs available. So
epic. Okay. Well, it's interesting to note too that it's not just being created to, interest the FPV community, which is obviously what it's for, like you said, but to actually provide another gateway for people to get into the hobby. And that's a really cool thing, because I feel like that, would you say that's what your mission is sort of on the YouTube side of things as well, is to help make things obviously easier and sort of get people into the hobby?
Yeah, I think so. That FPV is a huge learning curve, and a lot of people don't get past that learning curve, and the first step is to have someone learn that FPV exists, and then the second step is to have them to go, oh, I'm interested in that, I want to do that, and then they get some equipment, they don't know what equipment to get, and then they get the equipment and they don't know how to make it work. And it's incredibly, if you compare it to something like even a DJI drone, which they have their own complexity, but just about any Yahoo can buy a DJI drone and get it in the air in an afternoon, and FPV just isn't like that. So I wish more people were into it. I love it. I want it to grow and survive. Of course, I make my living at it, and so helping people get over that learning curve is a big motivation for me.
For sure. Where do you see FPV going in 10 years' time then?
10 years is way too far out to even predict. I think you could try to make guesses about 2 years. And I think that what we're seeing right now is the effect of regulation in the United States, definitely, and around the world, is really shaping the public perception of FPV. I hear, and I don't know how much of this is true, but I definitely hear from people who say, well, this regulation is too much, I'm going to go try a different hobby. I'm sad about that, because, there's nothing about the regulation that means that you can't participate in the hobby and enjoy the hobby, but it feels onerous and it feels restrictive, and some people just puts a bad taste in their mouth. At the same time, we have a lot of hopeful things going on where FPV is, being exposed to the public. We have, Alex Vanover working with Michael Bay for the ambulance film, and Michael Bay's just like seems legitimately psyched about cinema drones, right? We see drones doing all these things and coming into the public view in a way that they haven't. So it's this time where it seems like there's a lot of sort of potential and promise, but also a lot of uncertainty. And it's difficult to predict where it's going to be in 2 years, never mind 10 years.
Yeah, I got you. Where do you hope to see it be then in say 2 years?
I think realistically, I would love if some of the regulations, like the FAA regulations, like remote ID, were changed to be a lot less restrictive. I think that does not seem to be the FAA's intent. And some of the things that have seemed like they might be sort of hopeful little sort of backdoors to being able to continue to enjoy the hobby the way that we always haven't really seemed to play out. So I hope that people are able to continue to enjoy the hobby the way that they have. I hope that we continue to see more and more opportunity for people doing commercial work. People, the more people can make money at a hobby, sort of the more it can grow and sort of be legitimized. But mostly I just hope that all the people who want to enjoy FPV flying around, with goggles on their face are able to continue to do it, because I think it's a really great hobby.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like the hobby has not only like, and I hear this from a lot of people, it's not just like the fact of, flying around having fun. It's like actually being involved in a community, and a community that like really is tight knit. And I feel like I went to my first race event not too long ago, and it was my first time really being exposed to like at a proper community of within the FPV space. And it was the nicest, like most welcoming place to be. And I feel like that's like such a big reason why I feel like FPV needs to continue progressing forwards. And like it's definitely difficult. Not only obviously over where you are in America and whatnot, but like in the US, but in New Zealand, but like the rules are equally as frustrating, I guess you could call them, and they just feel
For sure.
very much so like they're funneling us out slowly but surely. It's sort of a bit annoying.
It's tough. I don't know how people in like New Zealand, Australia, some European countries where the rules are very, very restrictive, even more restrictive than here in the United States. I don't know how they do it. I assume, I could be wrong about this, that people are just they're breaking the rules and they're just not getting caught and no one cares. Which is certainly going to work for a while, I guess. There's definitely people who just say, I'm just going to fly and I don't care.
It's definitely the case. There's definitely a lot of people that, it happens even with the DJI drones and stuff. Like people, they either don't know the rules or they specifically go out and break the rules. But there's definitely the upside about the rules is there's ways that you can still do it within the rules, within the laws, and keep it all legit. So that's an upside. But yeah, I feel like the more further we go in the future, the harder it's going to get. But yeah, that's all right. That's legality side of things. We can keep having fun and keep progressing with our side.
I'm going to keep having fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point of this whole thing, to keep having fun. And have you, on a slightly different note, have you been like looking into the AI space side of things of just in general, like artificial intelligence?
I wouldn't say I'm like an expert at it or anything, but I'm super interested and I'm intrigued by it. I think that these natural language models like ChatGPT are one of the most exciting sort of technological leaps forward that I've really ever seen in my life. Like, you sort of grow up and you have a sense based on the state of technology from the age of, like, let's say 5 to 15 years old. You have a sense of what kind of things are possible, like self-driving cars. My kids, they're not going to even understand that a self-driving car is weird. They're just going to have self-driving cars. So I grew up, and to me, like, voice recognition and understanding that was like just completely outside the realm. Like the idea that you could just say, hey, Alexa, turn on the lights or something, and they would just understand and parse that. That's extraordinary. But then to flip that and have them be able to carry on a conversation is, it's hard for me to think of any single technological jump in my lifetime that is that sort of like this is just sci-fi.
Yeah, the extremities of it, and just how many different things it can do. I mean, even just ChatGPT with text, right? Like it blows my mind still to the day of just what you can achieve with it. But I was kind of curious on the thought of, do you see it being implemented within FPV and like within, I guess, beta flight, and because being an open source side of things, we can, I don't know, potentially use these AI tools and technology to advance, the flying side of things.
Here's the challenge with that. So this is something that has been played with. There was something not too long ago, a Drone Mesh was playing with it. It was someone's like PhD thesis or something like that. And it was, I forget what it was called. I'm blanking on it right now, but it was basically a machine learning AI-based PID controller, except it's not a PID controller. It's AI-based. It's machine learning. And I think Pavel Spakowski recently, the iNav developer, posted some little screenshots of some code he was playing with, where he was playing with machine learning. To me, the big challenge with can we use AI or machine learning to make drones fly better than they do now? So the big challenge with that is that in order to train a machine learning model, you need a humongous data set, and you need the ability to show the AI the data set, and it looks at the data set and it says, is this right? And it throws something out and you say, no, that's wrong. Or yes, that's right. You need to train it. And the ability, first of all, we don't have that data set. Like what we would need is like just millions and millions of black box logs, for example. But then even if we had that data set, the other thing we would need is the ability to tell the AI, this one is one where the flight controller did the right thing. This one is one where the flight controller did the wrong thing. And that's very, very difficult to overcome. In one case, in this project I just mentioned earlier, that Drone Mesh talked about, it was PID flight. PID flight was what it was called. They trained the AI in a simulator. So they had a simulator that simulated physics and simulated the AI's inputs and the effect of the AI's inputs. Well, that's fine, but then your AI model is only as accurate as your simulator. So you really want to be able to train it on real world data, and the ability to sort of iterate that real world data, I think is going to be very, very challenging. It's not like you can, I think it's going to be very challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the whole AI side of things is so new still. So it's such a new, obviously machine learning has been around for a while, but this whole new, I'm going to call it a revolution of artificial intelligence breakout that we've had recently, that's very much so a new side of things. So it's just interesting to sort of, I guess, see and hear about what your thoughts were on that, because I feel like there's parts of it that we'll eventually figure out, and maybe it'll open up some new features and beta flight that we've never even thought of. Who knows? I guess like it's sort of this big unknown world. And
I think the place that's most exciting is, if we're specifically talking about natural language processing, the place where it's got the most potential is in education, in troubleshooting, and so forth. It still has a long way to go, because like the problem with ChatGPT, for example, is that when it's wrong, it sounds like it's right. It can give you a very, very right sound. My son the other day was talking to me, and he was like, yeah, after World War II, the Qing dynasty fell, and that's why Taiwan is a separate island and from mainstream mainland China. I was like, oh, that sounds like this kid knows what he's talking about. And then I went and looked it up, and like the Qing dynasty fell in like 1625 or I don't know, 18. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it wasn't after World War II. He was completely wrong in every respect. He sounded good. And ChatGPT can be like that. So when they give you
Right.
an answer, you don't always know if it's going to be the right answer. But I guess that's true for people to some degree too.
Going off of, I guess, not bad taste, but like bad recommendations as such, what's something that you hear that like within the FPV space that you just wish you didn't have to hear or didn't think that people believed?
You like a misconception or something?
Yeah, like
Or
what's
bad advice?
yeah, like a bad recommendation, bad advice. What's something like that you hear consistently that you're like, no, like don't do that. That's just so.
I'll tell you one piece of advice that I don't agree with is some people recommend that you start learning to fly with a tiny whoop because a 65 millimeter, a little tiny whoop, it's true that they're inexpensive. That's a benefit. It's true that they're in some ways more durable than a 5-inch. But the real challenge is that people try to learn to fly them and they fly them indoors, which they think is safer because you can't fly away. But the problem is indoors, there's so much stuff to crash into. It's actually really hard to fly a tiny whoop indoors if you're a beginner because you get out of control and then you just crash into the wall and you're down. Whereas if you're flying outdoors, like in a big open environment, you have a lot more room to kind of get some altitude and to kind of, make a mistake and then recover. But tiny whoops don't fly great outdoors, especially if there's a little bit of wind. So I would say the best way to fly is probably not a tiny whoop. It might not be a 5-inch either, though. Maybe something in between, or of course a simulator.
Yeah, I guess on that, like if you were to put yourself or put somebody into a complete noob state, like of having no idea about, FPV, and maybe they've just seen your documentary, right? Flow State, and they come in and they're like,
right,
how do I start? Like, what am I doing to go from complete noob to, maybe getting closer to flying like a professional or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, the thing to do is to spend maybe as little as 40 or 50 bucks on a controller, or a better controller is going to be in the range of maybe $100 to get a controller, and then get a simulator. Like you can get one off of Steam. You can get Velocidrone. Velocidrone's maybe a little expensive for somebody who's just getting started and wants to, but just get any simulator, even a free one, and try it. There's online lessons. Some simulators have built-in tutorials that'll get you started, but you can try it in the simulator, and with relatively small investment, those skills 100% transfer, especially in the beginning. The fact that the physics of the simulator are not like perfectly accurate doesn't really matter because you could barely fly the damn thing anyway. And just start there, and then while you're playing in the simulator, also be researching what you're going to buy and what quad you're going to get. But that's how I would definitely tell anybody to get started. It's the lowest investment to get you flying
and get you started into it. So then, what are they taking? What you sort of mentioned, maybe don't go for a tiny whoop. What sort of quad should somebody get as their first? Are they going for a pre-build? Are they going to go straight into it and build something? Like, what's sort of the best route?
Well, so that's going to depend a lot on the individual. If somebody absolutely doesn't want to build, then I steer them towards the Rotor Riot pre-builds. Rotor Riot bind and fly. You can get a Rotor Riot bind and fly quadcopter controller, batteries, charger, everything. Literally just take it out, turn it on. It's all set up and completely ready to go. That's going to cost a little bit more than if you built it yourself. Not as much more as people think it is, but there's a little bit of a premium there. But it's just the least number of steps to get you going. The thing is, the problem with that is that eventually you're going to crash it, you're going to break it, and you're going to need to learn to repair it. So a lot of people are going to end up learning to build, but maybe they don't want to build the very first day. They just want to have the experience of flying it a little bit before they crash it, break it. If you go with a build, the best thing to do is to find a good tutorial video by the exact same parts that person bought, and then follow along as closely as you can. And of course, I've got some tutorials as well. Um, but that's the direction I would steer somebody.
Is there a specific type of quad that you'd sort of aim, like push them towards going? Like, are we talking smaller 3-inch? Are we sort of going for cine whoops for the the protection side of
Yeah.
things? Like, what's sort of a good direction?
So that depends on what kind of flying the person is most interested in, and what and other considerations. Like, for example, if you live in an urban environment where you can't be flying even like a powerful 5-inch, you might need to get something smaller. If you have a little bit more space to play around, you might be able to do something a little larger. I would say that as long as you get to a point in the simulator where you're reasonably capable, and I don't mean like pulling tricks, but like you get past that point where the minute you take off, you're out of control and the quad has a life of its own, and then you crash. And if you can take off, you can basically fly around and you can land or at least controlled crash more or less where you mean to, then you're basically ready to fly even like up to a 5-inch freestyle drone. It would just be a question of what kind of flying you want to do. A lot of people lean towards a sit-a-whoop because they have prop guards and it feels like they're safer, and there's some truth to that, but they're not very fast and they're not really good at acro. So unless what you want to do is just kind of tool around, then a sit-a-whoop might not be the best choice.
Interesting. Okay, so I guess it all depends on, I guess, what you want to be, what you aim to go into it for. Because I guess if you go in with a racing mind, you're probably going to want something that's not a cine whoop.
Exactly.
Whereas if you come into it with a cinematography mindset, you're going to potentially want. I mean, you still very much so might want a freestyle, but the cine whoop could be a good option to go with there as well.
Yeah, it just depends on what you want to do. For somebody who's more concerned with size and safety, a 3-inch, you can get 3-inch quadcopters in the 250 gram to 300 gram weight range. Being under 250 grams in the U.S. helps you with some regulations, so that's nice. I think if I had to pick one quadcopter to be somebody's first quadcopter just for everybody, I'd say a 3 or 3.5-inch freestyle quad under 250 grams all up weight. It's going to be relatively safe. It's going to be relatively durable. It's going to have pretty reasonable speed and agility, and it's going to be able to do almost anything you ask it to do, at least okay, if not great.
For sure, yeah. Within its, I guess, within what it's capable of. And then, I guess the final thing on that is, once you've gone past your simulator, you've got your drone and stuff, are we going out, there's like, I always hear controversial, like, opinion, well, not controversial, but just very different opinions here. Do you go in and learn line of sight first, and then once you're good at line of sight, or do you just pop those goggles on and go for it?
I am not in agreement. There's instructors out there who say that you absolutely need to learn line of sight, and I think that is outdated. That's not to say that being able to fly line of sight has no advantages. I've seen Alex Vanover. Alex Vanover, in the middle of a trick, he loses video and he just rips his goggles up and flies at line of sight and saves it. And if he couldn't fly line, and of course he's a really good line of sight pilot. Like, the ability to do that is mind boggling to me. I can hover line of sight and basically sort of fly in a circle, and that I use that if I want to like check things, my props are right or whatever. I'll take off line of sight. But that's the extent of it. There's advantages to line of sight, but I definitely don't think it's required. I don't think the ability to fly line of sight makes you a better FPV pilot in very many ways. I will say I've had some students who really just could not make FPV flying click because what the sticks were making the drone do just didn't sort of connect in their mind with what they were seeing in the goggles. And I would say I was another instructor I was working with who was like, dude, let him fly line of sight. I was like, that's stupid. But he was right. He let the students fly line of sight, and when they saw the quad hovering in front of them, tilting and rolling, and then after just a little bit, 20 minutes of that, it clicked for them and they were able to fly FPV. So there definitely are some advantages. I personally think just put the goggles on and learn to do it. And if you feel like learning to fly line of sight or that's not working for you, go for it. But I think there's plenty of great FPV pilots out there who can't fly a line of sight. I don't think it really matters.
That's some super duper valuable information there. So obviously you run your YouTube channel, which is completely a humongous just information bomb consistently day after day of seeing new content put out there. So how can the listeners find and support you, and also with the Flow State documentary again, how do we find everything and support you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Joshua Bardwell on YouTube, and flowstatedocumentary.com is the film's website. I'd love, if anybody hasn't seen that, I'd love to have you check it out. And everybody also can email me if they have FPV related questions. jb@joshuabardwell.com. My inbox is open. Try to help everybody that I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today, Joshua. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brody.